Hi, this is Doug Tilden. This is the third and final video on the introduction to the Maya. In this video, we'll spend quite a bit of time talking about the Maya arts. We'll talk some about the Maya collapse. We'll also talk a little bit about some conclusions about the Maya. Maya arts. When civilizations advance from simple survival mode, the transition is usually accompanied by development of art forms. The Maya developed very distinct art forms, and we're going to look at four today. The first is ceramics, then jade, architectural stone, and obsidian and other stones. But first of all, where do we find Maya art objects and artifacts? That's very simple. We mainly find them in tombs. True of most civilizations. The artifacts that we use to understand the civilization come mainly from tombs. But who gets buried in tombs that last 1,300 years in the case of the Maya, or 5,000 years in the case of the Egyptians? Basically the top 1% of society. The rulers, the priests, and the wealthy elite. This can give us a very distorted view of the history of a civilization. In recent times, much more effort's been made to understand the other 99% of any civilization. Fortunately, with the Maya, most common people build their houses on mounds due to the wet soil. This is a picture of a reconstruction of a Maya house mound. Although the houses did not survive, the mounds did. Often we also find garbage pits near the mounds, and occasionally a buried relative or two in simple graves. These things can help us begin to understand the 99% of the population not buried in elaborate tombs. But back to the arts, ceramics. We begin our journey through Maya art with ceramics. This is the tomb of the warrior queen that we found at Znantinich. She was buried with over 30 pieces of ceramic, mainly bowls and plates. And fortunately for us, a couple of them were painted with dates. We have other ways to date a tomb, but it's really nice when we are left with a date on some ceramics. She was also buried with jade, obsidian, and some simple jewelry. This is an example of a painted plate we found in a tomb at Cajalpeche. The way that the plate is made and the style of the painting has been cataloged by archaeologists over time. And we can often date a tomb simply from the style and painting of the ceramics. This is a pot we found in a tomb. The tomb roof had collapsed and crushed most everything else in the tomb except for this pot. The pot has an image of a wild pig on top, and the painted image of a figure on it that we see over and over again in pots that are centuries apart. An elongated, bound captive. This is the pot cleaned up, along with other artifacts from the tomb. The shell has an incised drawing of the rain god, Chak. I mentioned him previously. This is another pot from a different tomb from that same pyramid. It's also from a different time period, but it has the same similar image of the bound captive. One interesting fact is that we find no evidence of warfare at this site, yet we have the images of the bound captives. This is a very famous pot. It was also found in Belize. It is for drinking and is inscribed on the top rim as having been gifted from one city-state ruler to another. As you can see, ceramics can tell us a lot about the Maya. Jade. Jade is my favorite. The two best deposits of jade in the world are in Myanmar, what used to be called Burma in Asia, and in Guatemala. The Maya did not have gold, and jade was their most precious stone. These are two jade bars from a very elaborate tomb we found. There were around 1,100 jaguar and dog teeth with these jade cylinders, and we think the teeth were strung from the jade, and this was an ornate necklace that a king wore. We're pretty sure the person was a king. we found this ring that is inscribed with his name. This is the jade face that we found in that same tomb. It's one of my favorite pieces. That tomb was full of jade. Apparently the king really liked jade. These are all the jade pieces from that tomb. I found these in the warrior queen's tomb. The Maya often used different material as teeth inserts, but only the top of the 1%ers could have afforded jade inserts in their teeth. The ultimate use of jade was in masks. There were very few of these. This mask was found in a tomb in Kahal Pesh several decades ago. Architectural stone. The Maya decorated their architecture with art. Often temples were decorated with masks, like this temple in Belize. We often find fragments of these masks in later stages of temple construction. Remember how I said that the Maya would build their temples on top of each other? When they did, they often broke up the earlier masks and buried them in the new construction. Another use of sculpted stone was in stela. A stela is a stone monument often placed in front of temples. They frequently tell a story about the site or about the temple itself. This is a large sculpted panel called a frieze on the major temple at Antonich. It has been restored by archaeologists. The frieze contains images of gods and images of the Maya universe. Obsidian and other stones. Obsidian is another one of my favorites. It's a volcanic glass that is very beautiful and can be very sharp. These are obsidian blades. Remember how I said that rulers had to give blood to ensure that the crops flourished? The priests would often use blades like this to draw the blood. These are 3 of 8 blades we found in the queen's tomb. When she was buried, she had her bloodletting blades buried with her. Obsidian is also fashioned into what are called eccentrics. These are fantastic shapes of humans, animals, and celestial objects and other things that were used in ceremonies. This is an eccentric made of a material called chert. We found this randomly buried in a temple we were excavating. The Maya seem to drop them as they build the temple to give the temple some sort of a blessing. We also find eccentrics in what we call caches. A group of obsidian and other stones fashioned into eccentrics were buried in prominent places in a structure or in front of a structure to bring best wishes of the gods on the structure. These were found in front of the pyramid that contained the tomb of the warrior queen. The Maya collapse. So what happened? Around 900 CE, the Maya began abandoning these amazing cities. This is the site of Lagunita in central Yucatan. It was only recently found after being abandoned around 1000 CE and covered by jungle for the last 1,000 years. As the Maya left the traditional areas, some new cities emerged in northern Yucatan, like Chichen Itza. It appears that whatever happened in the collapse didn't affect the very northern tip of the Yucatan. Many Maya died in the Maya collapse. No one knows for sure, but it is believed that as many as several million died. The survivors returned to a more rural lifestyle. The organized production of art throughout the classic Maya world pretty much stopped with the abandonment of their cities. Similarly, their written language went out of common use and finally was lost for centuries. So why did the Maya collapse happen? There are many theories, and archaeologists and historians disagree on what caused it. Some of the major theories are that there was a war between the city-states. There had always been some level of war, but maybe it just got more intense. That there was an invasion from another civilization from outside the Maya area. There could have been a disease or a plague. That drought impacted their food supply. or probably or possibly overpopulation stressed their resources. The consensus view, and certainly what I believe, is that it was a combination of things, but primarily triggered by drought. Environmental scientists have documented that there were severe droughts in the Maya area starting in the mid-800s and lasting for almost 200 years. The Maya had been so successful and their populations had gotten so large that the reductions in crops from the drought meant they couldn't feed themselves. There is some evidence for increased warfare as resources were reduced, but this did not happen in all locations. It appears that the sites we work at in Belize were just abandoned. It's likely that the undernourishment also caused disease. Most of all, the people stopped believing in their systems. Remember how I said that the peasants provided their labor to build the cities so that the kings and priests could communicate with the gods and make sure that the rains came and the crops grew? Imagine how they felt when the crops stopped growing. In most cases, the people just left, but there is evidence in some cities that the rulers and priests were killed. The Maya experience can be a warning for us today. Unlike the Maya, we have the tools to fight global warming if we choose to. I hope that you've enjoyed these videos on the Maya. Despite the fact that Mayan archaeology has been going on for over 150 years, there's still much that we don't understand about the Maya. For example, the temple we found at Znantanich changes the likely date for the founding of that particular part of the city-state by almost 1,000 years. There are still many structures and small cities to be found. There's new technology that uses a form of radar called LIDAR to penetrate the jungle that's been helping to identify some of these lost structures. In addition, there are many unanswered questions. The Maya left some written record, but only on things that were carved in stone and a few painted murals. Things written on bark or other types of paper are long gone and leaves us to have to figure out what actually happened based on other evidence. That's one of the reasons there are so many disagreements between archaeologists. I hope you've enjoyed finding out about this fascinating civilization and that you'll stay curious as we learn more about them. I want to thank Dr. Jaime Awe, the head of the Belize Valley Archaeological Reconnaissance, who I've worked with now for 11 years in Belize, as well as Caterina Santasolia, who headed the Cahal Pesh project for 4 years and found many of the beautiful items that I've used in this presentation. Thank you.